Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. Oh, 1 second, I just have to sort something out. Right, we're back. In 1949, George Orwell published a book now known the world over. That book was of course 1984. The book is unsurprisingly set in 1984, where Great Britain is now known as Airstrip 1, a new totalitarian superstate of Oceania. Its strong themes of a dystopian future in which the party controls all and independent thoughts are quashed, the themes of 1984 have become synonymous with political oppression. It spawned the terms Orwellian, Thought Police, and of course, Big Brother. Its bleak outlook on world politics are made even darker by its uncanny sense of truth woven into the narrative. The book is an all-time classic, and the film adaptation is perhaps some of John Hurt's best work. But what about a computer game? Well, to the best of my knowledge, there never was an official 1984 game associated with either the book or the film. However, the year 1984 has become such a byword for political dystopian nightmares in the British language, it's fair game to use in everyday language. And that's what we get here in the Spectrum game 1984, a game of government management from Incentive Software Limited. The game is based neither directly on the book or the film adaptation, yet it is what I can best describe as an economic simulator wrapped up in a political theme. Think theme park, but with more stats and a focus on government spending. It's certainly one of the more interesting titles in my collection. It neither goes out of its way to promote totalitarianism, dystopian futures, or indeed any sort of bleak future. It does, however, highlight the stresses and strains of running a balanced economy that is seen as fair to everyone. In my opinion, although there are thousands of sim-like games out there, there's nothing else quite like 1984. I wanted to cover the game briefly today, as it's a game that most gamers perhaps won't have heard of, or at least played. Now, I have to say that this is a retro game collecting channel, and as such I very rarely express any political views. People tend to get very angry in the comments section if you express any unpopular opinion these days. In the current climate though, I thought that we might be ready to highlight a political game. On the surface, it's just a number punching game, but beneath its surface lies a fiendishly complex economic simulator. The premise of the game is simple. It's 1984 and you now control the government, effectively every position from Chancellor to Prime Minister. The aim is to survive multiple general elections and balance the books. Sounds simple. To add a bit of context to the game, the 1980s was a relatively unstable time for the UK government. There were several race riots, rising unemployment, and generally, well, we had a few issues with the neighbours. Which is why this 1983 release made for a rather topical, if somewhat niche game, whilst family-friendly platformers were the order of the day. So, let's have a look at what makes this game tick. First of all, it's important to state that the starting balance sheet used is that of the real 1982 to 83 UK government economics figures. There's no mouse, no joystick, simply numbers. Up first, we see the balance sheet breaking out our government's sources of revenue and spending. You can see this as your main stat board at the end of each round. Next up, we take a look at the major indicators. Briefly put, these explain how different aspects of the economy are doing. For example, unemployment and inflation rates will be key to keep your eye on. To get even more detail, you can select a number from the menu to see the ongoing trends. You'll then be asked whether you would like to adjust the Bank of England base rates. This has the impact of either making it more beneficial to borrow money if the rate is lowered, or reward savers by increasing it. We're then treated to a quick health check of the economy in general. Broken down into government, industry, population, banking and world sectors, it will become part of your strategy to ensure that these are all well managed. At the starting point, these will be indexed at 100, but as you progress, your style of government will inevitably favour one sector more than another. I'm a child of the 80s myself and grew up in the Thatcher years, so I'm going to tend towards a strong industrial sector. My thought process is that if you have a strong industry, you have high employment. High employment means more tax being paid that I can then spend on the other sectors. Well, that's the idea many governments have had, although in practice it's a little bit more complicated than that. Then, our first piece of real excitement, the Cabinet meeting. Yes, the Board of British Railways have asked for investment. It does mean that I'm going to have to increase the spending budget, but I feel I owe it to the train passengers. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. Next up, wages. Civil servants, the public sector and private sectors all want wage increases. I won't cave in totally, but I think we all deserve a pay rise. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. Next up, government investments. I'm a strong believer that we need to keep a strong financial sector for the good of the people, so I'll pump in a moderate amount of investment. I need to keep those banks happy. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. Next up, the departmental expenditure. This is where the game really starts testing your economic skills. Inflation has risen, as have wages, and I've also spent quite a bit propping up the financial sector. So here's where you can fine-tune your spending. From police on the streets to new housing to education, you really can invest where you see fit. I'm going to be kind and give almost all departments some extra cash. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. So already my strategy has been issued a warning. With my relatively high inflation, the benefits system is falling behind. Basically, people relying on the government benefits are going to find my regime a little bit difficult. Come on though, I've invested in industry and transport people. Get off your sofas and get a job like the rest of us. Nope, no more free money for you. What about foreign aid? Oh, go on then, have another billion. I don't want the people to starve. I'll find the money from somewhere else to subsidise this. Ah, industrial grants. Good idea. Let's get the people of the UK working again. Long live Britain. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. And so we've survived our first year in office and have a reasonable rating. On to 1985. So the balance sheet is looking fairly healthy. A deficit of 366 million might sound a lot, but it was worth the investment to allow the country to grow. Oh, for goodness sake, people. Seems that the people have taken to the street in marches against authority, passive resistance and urban terrorism. I'll have to give the Home Secretary more money to crack down on these left-wing nuts. I'll find the money from somewhere to subsidise this. Seems that housing funding is falling behind. Well, they're all out on the streets anyway, so I'm not going to invest any more in housing. Well, I need to save a bit of cash now. What? The overseas lot want more foreign aid? How about no? Okay, so a few people die. Oh, okay then, perhaps not. Have another billion. But remember which sugar daddy it was who bailed you out. Honestly, things were so much easier in the days of the British Empire. So the game progresses and the decisions you make will come back to haunt you. In the end, I ran quite a strong economy. We were industrious, the population was contributing well, and the banking system also held up. I ended up sacrificing some government funding and world peace to keep the people happy, but they're worth it. However, by 1988 the power had gone to my head a little by going full-on capitalist. It's all about the people and industry. The rest of the world? Yeah, that's in trouble. So this gave me a good laugh. My government actually received a £7 billion rebate from the EEC, the European Economic Community. On January the 31st, 2020, the UK left the successor to the EEC, the EU, or the European Union. Basically a club of European countries who pool resources, work on joint ventures and arrange favourable trading agreements and other benefits such as the right to travel. By a narrow margin, the UK government ended up taking the UK out of the EU. Without getting into the politics of it all, it's fair to say it's been a mixed bag when it comes to public opinion. So a £7 billion rebate very much seems like an alternative universe, considering the divorce bill of the UK leaving the EU is just around the corner. Anyway, the game continues until either the economy becomes unviable or social unrest overthrows the government. In my case, I was actually too kind in the end by raising public spending. I should have been harder on my people and taxed the living daylights out of them while spending no money on them. You know, like the real 80s. The game does a really decent job of giving you the stats you need to see where you're going wrong. My inflation rates were clearly an issue, although I did maintain decent employment levels. The UK's GDP, Basically how productive we were was excellent, and the average wage had never looked better. Of course, all of this investment had to be paid for and ultimately meant government resources were depleted. What looks like a relatively simple equation is actually a complex economic ecosystem. The game even comes with a pocket guide to running Britain, and a good place to start if you want to understand basic economic principles. You're even treated to an economic model of the interactions. As mentioned earlier, I've never played a game quite like 1984. It's very much a niche game for economists and analysts, and the underlying level of detail is exceptional. Granted, it's a condensed economic model, but the overall implementation really gives you a sense of financial management. You find yourself wanting to help the people, but ultimately you can't help everyone all of the time. At times I found myself saying no to pay rises for the police who protect us, the medical staff that heal us, and taking money out of the hands of those on the breadline just to make the economy work as a whole. And that's the truly frightening legacy of the game 1984. Not the dystopian future of the book, but the knowledge that even good people trying to do the right thing will have to make choices that negatively impact others. The only other game that springs to mind with this type of mechanism is Papers, Please, a game in which you must check passports of people arriving into your country. The jeopardy here is whether you let some people in that you shouldn't to meet your quotas. If you happen to be in a position to play 1984, a game of government management, I would highly recommend it, if nothing else just as a retro gaming curio. Ignore that there's no fancy graphics, it's all about the gameplay and decision making. It doesn't matter which country you're from or which person you voted for, or even if you bothered to vote at all. There's a lot that you can learn from a simple game like this. If you play the game of government management, be aware that your actions have consequences. Make cuts to industry and see the rifts in society open up. Mismanage government resources and see society divide. Turn a blind eye to the powerful and corrupt and expect social injustice. Unbalance the welfare state and experience the unrest. If you play the game of government management, lead from the front, set an example, be the leader that you would want, and the rest of society will follow. After all, some games are more real than others.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody. This is a great day for everybody. This is a great, great day.
If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!